This is a really exciting week in the history of humankind. For somewhere in the world this week, so we are told, the 7 billionth person was born. Now, I don't know who they are, I don't know if they know who they are, I don't know if they come out with 7 and lots of zeros wrapped around their head. Even more disarming would be the fact that if somebody died a few minutes later, they would suddenly go back to being the 6,999th person in the world. But let's say that this is an exciting week. And apologise for the fact that I froze the frame when this man was clearly trying to feel his way towards the 7 billionth person in the world. But we were on the BBC, and we were on the BBC who were focusing in on Zambia because, according to the news stories, we now have the fastest growing population in the world. Oh, is that to be clapped? Yes, well done us. Obviously somebody there who's responsible for at least some of that population growth. Okay, so what is apparently happening to our population, which is currently somewhere around 13 million, is that by the turn of the century, it's going to be 100 million. So you really do need to get out to work there. 950% increase in population in that period of time. Now that's a lot of mouths to feed, given that 64% of our population is already living below the poverty line. So we've got to do something in order to deal with those extra people. There's 87 extra million people that are going to appear in the next few years. And one of the comments in the news that I saw as a result of this was that, and it's very obvious, that if we're going to cope with that growth, we need economic growth, we need health, and we need wealth. And if we're going to get wealth, the only way it's going to happen is through education. We've got to change the way that people are thinking, we've got to improve the quality of that education in order that the people are much more productive than they are at the moment, or potentially are, because it's a huge new swathe of people that we've got to really build as the powerhouse of the country. It seems odd, therefore, to show you as the next slide a picture of a satellite dish. As was said, I've been working in ICT in this country in one shape or form for the last 25 years or so, and this is by far the most exciting of the times that we've been through, because this thing is now being replaced by this thing. Now, isn't that exciting? Okay. If you're like me, you're turned on by this kind of stuff. Those are submarine fiber optic cables. So those cables, transmitting light for transmitting data, are now going under the sea all around Africa, and then there are other ones going across the continent. So you'll see all of these nice thick lines that are coming around the outside are the new cables, some of which haven't yet arrived, most of which have now arrived, carrying data in or out of the continent, instead of the satellites that we had to use until about 2 years ago. 2 years ago, the only way in or out of the country for voice or data was satellite. Very expensive, bit slow, various problems. Fiber, much better, and lots more coming in as well. So this is an even more exciting week this week, not just because of the 7 billionth person, but because that new fiber line that comes through Zimbabwe has just gone live as well. So we've now got a number of routes coming in or out. The one through Botswana is about to go live as well, and so on. Now, suddenly we are better connected to the outside world than we have been before. And interestingly, Zambia, which was very isolated in its past, is now becoming a switching and communication centre for the region. That slide somehow has come out back to front. Never mind. What it shows is that there are also now a lot of fibre optic cables around inside the country. And that map is of mobile phone coverage in the country. Roughly 88% of our population now lives under mobile phone access. 6.2 million of our 13 million people have a cell phone. Now, remembering that half of our population is under 16 or thereabouts, that means most of the adult population nowadays has got a phone of some shape or form. Sometimes fairly cheap phone, but it works, okay? And where you've got phone coverage, you've also got data coverage. It may be slow again, but you've got it. And those companies that are putting out WiMAX, for example, WiMAX is a great technology for delivering higher speed internet, non-line of sight, long distance, works well in this kind of environment. That's now covering about 50% of the population as well. Sadly, it doesn't mean they can all afford it, but it means it's there. It's not ready for the man in the street necessarily, but that will change. And here's another one of the things that's changed over the last few years, a technology that suddenly is suitable for Africa again. The advent of the netbook. Lower priced computer, will last on batteries all day, is relatively robust, and is much lower cost than what we've seen before as well. And the advent too of the tablet computer. Now, some of them are very expensive, but we're edging down and down. We're going to get to the point where it's $100, and we're going to get to the point where it becomes affordable and useful. Solar power is there. We have to remember, for example, in education that 2/3 of our primary schools don't have an electric power supply. Solar power isn't coming down as fast in price as other things, but it is coming down. Okay. So with all of this technology arriving, how quickly are we going to be able to change anything? The great thing is that the price of international bandwidth, for example, is now less than 10% of what it was 2 years ago. In another 6 months' time, it'll probably be half of that again. So again, we're coming closer to the world more quickly. It's still not down at by any means at the price that it would be in London or somewhere else, for example, but at least if we can manage to stop ourselves from downloading videos all day, there's a lot more useful stuff out there that we can get hold of. So with this technology that appears to be so appropriate for the continent, and that is coming down in price, that is coming closer to us, is it really crazy to think that we could be using that technology to deliver education, to deliver e-learning? It's quite a task, because that's a map of the schools in Zambia. There are about 8,500 of them. And they're not just concentrated, although there's a lot of them along the line of rail, as you can see, they're not just concentrated in the major urban areas. They are everywhere. Well, everywhere except where there be elephants and lions and so on, which is a bad place to put them. But we've really got a job if we're going to get out to those schools and get them connected, get them learning in a new fashion. It's a big job. And we've got about 3,500 community schools arising in those. Clearly the government has a huge job to manage to introduce universal free primary education. But one of the ways that's happening is through the rise of the community school that's funded and run by the local community. The downside of that school is that teachers tend to be far less well paid and tend to be less educated themselves, frequently having no teacher qualifications. And as you can see here, this is a community school. The average number of textbooks owned by a pupil is 1. And so it's going to mean that the majority of schools don't have any, and are pretty crowded in many cases as well, offering classes of 100 or so, as you're quite well aware. So a few years ago, we started to just dip our toe in the water and say, let's provide some free connectivity to a number of schools. Let's put up a website built around the Zambian curriculum, but where most of the links are to material outside the country. And let's see what happens. Some teacher training, but not very much. Now, the anecdotal evidence was good. Nobody gave up, everybody wanted more. But there were 2 clear lessons that were coming out of it. One is that it's no good giving fun, exciting e-learning material on the computer to the children on the left if the teacher is still going to operate as per the teacher on the right. In other words, the very conventional rote learning that we're used to. A lot of good memories, a lot of knowledge, not much understanding. So that has to change. The second thing is that however good the external content is, it's never going to really work unless it's Zambianized. we have to write that material from the ground up in Zambian language, with Zambian examples, Zambian culture, and Zambian props and so on as well. So we came up with that one criteria that we said we are going to move away from a situation where children are just learning to a situation where they are manipulators of information, where they need to go and find information. They know how to find it, they know how to manipulate it, they know how to use it, rather than just being taught it. And they are problem solvers. Okay, so what we did was, knowing that we've got such a disparate variety of schools out there, some very well-trained teachers, some untrained teachers, we said we'll put together a total learning environment which is fairly prescriptive. So that even if you're not used to writing lesson plans, even if you're not used to sticking to a fairly well-known formula, it will work for you. So for example, there's an annual planning overview that sits mapped around the Zambian curriculum in all of the subjects. There's the same thing for each half term. There's the same thing for each week. And then down to the individual lesson plan. The things at the bottom of the screen that you can't see very well there, because we can't afford a projector with focus, is actually the items in the Zambian curriculum which are covered by that lesson. There's the background and the prerequisites that you need. There's the questions that you're going to be asking, the kind of responses that you might expect. So it's all very well structured. And then what the children have got and the students have got is, for every other lesson, they've got some online multimedia interactive learning. This is precious. Precious is the way by which the beginners in grade 1 learn. They learn her stories, they learn about her family, they learn about her extended family going up and up, and we're cutting out the cousins which would go off around the cinema several times over. And here's the stories, like the obvious story that suddenly one day Precious can see a pink elephant walking into the classroom, the sort of thing we've all experienced. But it's great for primary school children. And here's the other important thing as well, that not only are the stories available in English, they are available in 8 vernacular languages as well. So up to grade 3, everything's available in all of those languages. And it's available not only in written form, but all of those words are spoken as you visit the online learning. So we've got children who are seeing stories in their own language for the first time, and I think that's exciting. We've also got some social science and social studies and so on going on in there. It's amazing what you learn at grade 1. Gosh, facts of life, no problem. Maybe it's no wonder there are 100 million people coming up. But the great thing with this is you can also take it and use it for those children who've left school early. For example, girls who've left school to get married when they're young or have children can come back and do the nutrition, can come back and do the childcare and so on. And when we've got stories about schools, we're using the sorts of things that you might find in any school. Crates, Coca-Cola bottle tops, sorry to advertise, and lots of sticks and so on. Easy sorts of things to find. And when we have stories about how to make friends, we're using stories about lizards that change colour. It's great fun, you can go and see them. They actually do change colour. And we hear stories in the village. I'm sure you recognise some of the people in the story. We hear stories of how exciting it is to come to town and be crossed in a minibus. And we also have lots of other learning material that's available to complement our own developed material. For example, that's the material from the Khan Academy. Hundreds and thousands of lessons about all sorts of other great stuff. Look up about more on the TED website. And Wikipedia, where we can put cut down versions of those on local computers. Nice and easy to see. And here's a very important part of the whole component as well. the whole project, and that is the teacher training part. We have to move teachers on from where they are towards being interactive, inquiry-based learning teachers. And here's some of the way we're doing it. Some of it's initially face-to-face, but then there's a complete one-year course developed in modules that's also available online and available on the local computers and servers and so on in the schools. And then the teachers are then mentored on a constant basis by phone, by internet, in order to move forward and support them when they're moving into this quite different way of doing things. So is it working? Can it work? Does it work? We've been testing it this last year or so by taking some of these computers and putting them in schools. Quite nice, rugged computers that are specially designed for primary schools. Quite robust, you can drop them, smash them and so on. And I promise it's been tried. Complete with headsets and so on. And lots of online help as to how to use them. In these schools, none of the children will ever have touched a computer before, and 90% of the teachers have never touched one either. And yet, within a day or two, they're there. Within 2 or 3 days, the children are hacking into the computers. And remember, they're only 5. I mean, they're starting early. The concept that you have to teach ICT in schools is just wrong. You don't. You just give them one. Okay, so we're monitoring very carefully, obviously, what's going on. We're trying to understand the way that the teaching can be changed and making sure that the content is right, that the teaching is right, and so on. And here is also one of the sorts of things we're seeing a change in the whole way of teaching in that classroom. So the children here are divided into groups. Some of the children are on computers, some of them are not, some of them are doing other activities, sitting on the floor. Some of them are actually having fun. Heck, that's a change as well. So what we're seeing is group work, and therefore you can also split the number of computers between more children, and that becomes more cost effective as well. In fact, we encourage sharing of the computer one between 2 children, as that way there's some good peer education going on at the same time as well. So next year there will be the first 3 grades of material will be available, and by the end of the following year all 7 grades of primary before we move on to secondary. We're experimenting in a number of different environments, and indeed and then understand where that money can come from within the local community. So an iSchool in a box contains enough computers, and the trolley can just be wheeled out to any particular classroom and distribute the computers. You don't need a special room. The content is included. A small server is included, a very tiny solid state thing, which actually contains most of the content. And so that you don't need to be permanently attached to the internet. It will update itself every night. And so therefore can work in quite remote environments. We provide solar power where it's needed, the teacher training where it's needed, and the mentoring and so on ongoing courses. And then a facility for the local community to be able to use that resource when it's not being used in the schools. So a community portal where it's possible to come out and find out about health information, agricultural information and so on, which will then generate some funding for the school in order to be able to continue to use the facility. So we've been talking to parents, we've been talking to members of the communities in the schools in which we've been working. And here you can see they've been seeing what their children have been doing. And they're very excited. That's the interesting thing. They're saying, yes, actually, I would be willing to pay something for this, even though this is meant to be a free school. And the amount that they're saying they're willing to pay is much more than we were expecting, given the sorts of salaries that we know that they're on, or given the subsistence farming money that's coming in. So, I don't know if you were like that when you were at school and rushing in the morning. I can't remember it. Well, then that was through the snow. So what we are seeing, though, certainly is children who are keen to stay on at school. We are seeing lower absentee rates. We're seeing lower teacher absentee rates, which is interesting as well, particularly in government schools, because they want to keep up with their peers in the education that's going on. We're seeing more fun classes. We're certainly seeing a change in levels of literacy and numeracy, even within a relatively short period of time. We're seeing people read earlier than they were, and actually in more than one language as well. So we're looking to get this out far more into the community now. We want people, wherever they are, to be able to use this system, as well as those that are in schools, those who can come back to school and relearn if they left, say, grade 4, see what they missed, do some maths. I think this will come before long. This is a representation of a tablet device, a sort of small device, maybe sort of 7 inches, with a solar panel on the back, would be terrific, running just a few specific apps, not the 900 apps that we have on smartphones here in the city necessarily, but an application for agriculture, for education, for health, for entertainment, for trading, for mobile money, for reading, and then some of your social networking and mail and browsing as well, and e-government. So of course, what we need to do, we don't know what jobs those 100 million children are going to be doing. The sorts of jobs that are going to be needed in 20 years' time, we don't even know how to train people for them now. They don't even exist at the moment. So we've got to be training the children to understand enough to learn on their own and be excited enough about learning when it comes to that 20-year period. We need to be saying, India, you've had your chance at being the call centre of the world and being the outsourced solution centre. We're in a better position to do that. We ought to be running transcription services, social services. We ought to be running business services. We ought to be the doctor who's doing the remote diagnosis and helping people elsewhere with their disease patterns wherever they are around the country. We ought to be the technical experts. There's no reason why we shouldn't be. We are very well connected now. We ought to be doing the training. And these two children ought not only to be receiving a really good education, and it doesn't matter where they are in Zambia, they ought to be receiving the same quality, at least, of education as if they were anywhere in the world. And we've got to look for that to happen if we're to develop with the wealth and the health that we need to if we're to manage to reach and look after our ever-increasing population. Thank you.